Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a super exciting video because this is my first time filming favorite books of the year. So in this video I'm going to be going through my favorite books of 2021. I did make a list of 10, but I do have 5 honorable mentions, so you know, it's like 15, but it's fine. Yeah. So like I said, I have 10 books. These are kind of in order, like 10 was the least that I liked, and then number 1's like my favorite of the year. But obviously these are all favorites of the year, so I like them all. There's some in there that are kind of like equals, but yeah, I'm just gonna get started. So at number 10 I have The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. This year, in 2021, I started a book club with my best friend here on BookTube, Cami from Borrows and Books, and this was our first pick, this was our first pick for the book club, and it was such a good book. So this book kind of follows the Montoya family and this kind of magical realism, and it has a really long like timeline. So basically the Montoya family all gather because their grandmother, or like some of the family members, it would be their mother, she is dying, and she wants to for them to collect their inheritance, but she's a very private person. She doesn't really talk about like her life before she had them, and basically it's kind of like a present tense, and then you go back in time to when Orquídea was a young girl and kind of her upbringing and just her childhood and everything. And I adored this book. This is also by a Latinx author, and I believe this follows like Ecuadorian, I forget every time, I believe it's Ecuadorian like culture. Obviously there's a lot of like elements of like Latinx family that I can really relate to because I'm Puerto Rican, so I adored this book so much. So coming in at number 9 I have Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. This one, again, I think you guys are gonna see like a trend of what I like. So this one also follows a big cast of characters. I believe there are 5 different POVs in this book and a really long timeline. This is also kind of magical realism, but there's also a little bit of sci-fi in there and historical fiction. So in these 5 POVs, they're also all set in like different locations, and they're all connected by this one story. So you kind of see the origin of the story and how it shapes like all of the lives of these people throughout so many years. I really love this book, and yes, this was number 9 of on the list. Coming in at number 8, I have another pick for my book club with Cami, Brujas and Books, and that is The Most Beautiful Girl in Cuba by Chanel Clayton. This one follows 3 women. This follows the Revolutionary War in Cuba. Yeah, so this follows the Cuban Revolution. This is a historical fiction novel, and it follows 3 different women. It's very feminist. Basically, there's this beautiful woman that is captured in this time, and she is put in this like women's prison that it's like it's just basically like a concentration camp. It's a horrible living conditions and all of that, and the media in the United States kind of catches wind of this, that this beautiful woman is in this prison and she shouldn't be in there, so they're trying to get justice for her. But we also follow like the reporter that is kind of covering the story, and then we follow another woman who's also somehow part of like getting this woman out of the concentration camp. So it's kind of hard to explain, but I loved it. There is romance. I think each woman that we hear from, there's 3 different women, they all have their whole like love life, I guess. So there is romance, historical fiction, war. It's a very beautiful novel. I really loved it. I do think that it could have been a little longer. It's I think like 300 pages or so, and it's very short for historical fiction, but I really loved it. The next book, I forgot how many I've said so far. I think this is number 7. But the next one is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I'm so surprised that I love this book so much because I feel like a lot of my friends know what I like and what I don't like, and a lot of my friends were telling me that I was not gonna like this book because I usually don't really love slow burn type of books, but I really love this one. I actually decided to pick it up because I saw Taylor Jenkins Reid say something about this book. She really loved it. So obviously Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of my favorite authors of all time, so I picked this up. This is a Greek mythology, and it follows Achilles and Patroclus, I believe his name was, and they kind of fall in love. This is also set in like a huge timeline, like you see them from when they're little kids all the way up to like adulthood kinda, and they are kind of like trained. So, and I also love like a little training arc moment, and then there's also war and all of that. My favorite thing about this book was the writing. It was very beautiful. I annotated this book and I just highlighted a lot of things and I really loved it. Coming in at number 6 is The One by John Marrs. I think I read this because this was becoming an adaptation on Netflix, which I actually never ended up watching because I started watching and it's nothing like the book, and I honestly just prefer the book. But I really love this. This one is about like a futuristic world where you can take your DNA, and they can match you with like your perfect person, like your soulmate. And this obviously causes a lot of trouble because of people that are already together and they get matched with someone else, or people that get matched with someone and that person is dead. So it causes a lot of issues. It's kind of a thriller. Well, it is a thriller novel, but there's also a lot of romance in this book, so I really enjoyed it. This follows like 5 different people, a lot of different characters in this book, so yes, I really loved it. But yeah, this is another one that I read this year and I loved. The next book on this list, I completely botched the order because I wasn't looking at my phone. I was just looking at the books that I have physically, and I have a couple that I don't own, so I completely botched this. But this one is number 6, and this one's Amari and the Night Brothers. I forget the author's name, I'm sorry. But this one is kind of like a fantasy. It's a middle grade novel, and this follows a young girl, and she kind of discovers that she has powers, and her brother recently went missing, and kind of the only way for her to find out what happened to her brother is to go to this like magical kind of school, and she goes there and she has to pass all of these tests. But if she doesn't pass the test, she kind of gets kicked out of the school. So she has to try really hard to stay there because otherwise she wouldn't be able to investigate more about what happened to her brother. I adore this novel. This is fantasy. I feel like if you're looking for something like Harry Potter and you don't want to read Harry Potter for obvious reasons, because I also don't want to, this is a great book to read. Alright, so coming in at number 5, I have City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. This one is a historical fiction novel, and I forget which era. I think it's like the 1940s or 50s, and this one follows a young woman, and she's kind of staying with like an aunt or something in New York City, and this is kind of like the showgirl scene era, and she's kind of like involved in all of that. She is like a seamstress, so she kind of gets involved in that world, and a little bit of like fame because there's like a famous show that she's working on, so she kind of gets like a hint of fame. It gave me a lot of Evelyn Hugo vibes, and I really loved it. It was historical fiction, and yeah, I read this this year and I loved it. So then number 4 would have been The One, and now we're coming in at number 3. So number 3 is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I read this for Jan's book club, the Full Moon book club, and this one is set in, it's a dual timeline for one. So we have a timeline where it's set in like London in the 18th century, and it follows this woman who is like an apothecary, but she kind of does like makeup, or like, they're not really potions. I think she might have done like makeup or like perfume or something, and it was poison, and she would help women kind of kill like their husbands and stuff, because back then you couldn't really get like divorced. So yeah, she helped people in that way, and she kind of meets this young girl, and she's kind of like training her to become like an apprentice at her apothecary, but obviously she kills people, so she kind of has to like protect this girl. And then the other timeline is kind of, alright, my camera caught me off, but as I was saying, the other timeline in this book is kind of the present timeline of this woman kind of finding information about the woman from the 18th century, and she's doing like research into this woman. So yes, another favorite of the year. Also, this one is historical fiction. I know this one was like really marketed because of book of the month also as fantasy, and this is not fantasy like at all. This is historical fiction. Alright, coming in at number 2 is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This one is set in the 1970s in Alaska. So we follow this family, and they're kind of in a crisis. They don't have a lot of money. The husband and the family, I believe he went to the Vietnam War, and he comes back home and he's like a changed man. But they're very poor, so, and he's kind of like, they're all having kind of like a midlife crisis. So the husband decides that they're moving to Alaska, and back then in the 1970s, I don't know a lot like about now if they're still like very off the grid, but back then this was like off the grid, like no electricity, you have to catch your own food. It was kind of like a survival mode type of thing here in Alaska. So it follows this family, and there's a young girl, and this also has a very, very huge timeline. So you see the girl from when she's like, I don't know, like 10 or 11 all the way till she like graduates high school and everything. So yeah, I really love this book. Historical fiction, you meet a lot of like the people from the town, and just a lot of things happen, and I really love this book. I feel like I am so terrible at explaining what these books are about, but I really hope that y'all pick these up. Okay, so I have some honorable mentions. I have a couple. I have more than 5. I don't know why I said I had 5, but I'm gonna go through them really quickly, and then I'll show you my favorite book of the year. So an honorable mention goes to No Exit by Taylor Adams. This book is set in 24 hours and is about this woman who is traveling across the country to go see her family. I believe her mother is in the hospital, and she has to stop at like a rest stop because there is a huge like winter storm coming. And once she's at this rest stop, she kind of goes outside to get some signal, and she sees that in one of the cars there is a kid like in a, what are those called, like those cages like for dogs. So basically this little girl is kidnapped, and someone in the rest stop did it, and there's a couple of people, so it's kind of like a whodunit type of story, and it's also set in 24 hours. And I read this I think in about 4 hours or so, but I read it all in one sitting and I really loved it. The next one is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I really love this book. This is also a historical fiction novel. I forget the era, 1983, and it's set in Malibu. If you've read Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, this does connect to that story, and this kind of follows like a group of siblings. They're siblings, they're all related. I forget how many, I think it's like 4 siblings, and they obviously all have very different lives. They are the children of this very famous person. So yeah, and it's also all leading up to like this huge party that they throw every year. And just shit goes down at this party, so yeah. The next book on my honorable mentions list is The Mary Shelley Club. I think it's by Goldie Moldavsky, something like that, I'm sorry. But this one's kind of like a Scream type of novel. It's kind of like a slasher kind of book. And this one follows like this new girl that starts in high school, and there is like a movie club. I forget what the club is called. I don't have it physically, but basically this club, they just do like pranks on people, and they make them look like famous scenes from like horror movies, and yeah, and things just go sour one night. So I love this book. I also read this book in one sitting, and this was more of like a YA mystery thriller novel if you're into that kind of thing. A next honorable mention is Peluda by Melissa Lozada Oliva. This one's a poetry collection and it's all about brown women and their relationship with hair, feminism. It's also very Latinx, so there's some Latinx references throughout this book that I really loved. And yeah, it's a little poetry collection. My next honorable mention, oh my god, I have so many, is Blood Like Magic by Lisel Samveri. This one, I think it's YA. It is fantasy and it's about this young girl and she's a witch, but you kind of have to go through like this trial in order to get your powers, and you're given a task, and the task that she is given is that she has to kill her first true love, and she's never fallen in love before, so basically she has to like go out there, find her true love, fall in love, and then kill him. I love this book. This book tackles so many things like police brutality and substance abuse, and there's trans representation, and I love that book so much. My next honorable mention, I swear I have two more, is None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney. And long story short, this is basically like a YA Silence of the Lambs slash Mindhunter, if you've seen Mindhunter on Netflix. And it's basically like, not me saying long story short and then going into details, but it's basically these two teenagers, and they've both been like survivors of like serial killer kind of sprees, I guess, and the FBI recruits them, so they talk to young people that have murdered other people to kind of get a different insight into their mind. So yeah, basically a YA Silence of the Lambs, and this was really good. My last honorable mention is Rock Paper Scissors by Alice Feeney. This one is one of the last books that I read. This one is a thriller, and it follows this married couple that is kind of going through ups and downs, and basically they win like a little getaway in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. Weird shit starts happening, you don't know what's going on, and then also simultaneously you're reading letters that the wife writes to her husband every anniversary. So yeah, it was a good one. Okay, so last but not least, I have my favorite book of the year here, and that is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. Are we surprised? I think so. I feel like I don't talk about this book a lot on here, so like I don't think anyone would have guessed that this is my favorite book of the year, but it is. I read this book for a little vlog that I did, like I think it was like reading the ultimate hot girl summer book, and I read this one and I loved it. If you don't know this book, what this book's about, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of this book if you're on BookTube, but this is the fourth book in the Agaton series by Sarah J Maas. The first one's A Court of Thorns and Roses, and it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And yeah, this one follows Nesta, and I loved it. I love the mental health rep, I love the romance, I love the fantasy elements, and just getting more into the story, I just loved it. I can't wait for the next one. And yeah, this is my favorite book of the year. I have a little necklace somewhere of the cover of this book, but I don't want to go get it right now. But yeah, my favorite book of the year here. Alright, so those were my favorite books of 2021. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't read any of these books, you should totally pick them up, because I mean, I think they're all great because they're my favorites of the year. So yeah, you should totally give them a shot. Thank you so much for watching. I believe this is the last video that I will be uploading on my channel in 2021. I'm currently, at this time as this is up, I am currently in Puerto Rico for holiday with my family, and I am vlogging down there, so that should be the first video up in 2022. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!